Calvin, thanks for coming in and talking to me today.
Not at all.
The theme of the discussion is going to be about history and essentially the leftist woke rewriting of history and the weaponisation of history.
Yeah.
So what was the mood music like there when Brexit happened? I mean, I remember, but
Right.
what was it like in schools?
Well, I think that's the moment I started becoming a political commentator, actually, because I started writing about what I was seeing in schools. Because I was, parents and people outside of the school environment need to know what's going on within these walls.
Yeah.
And the teachers were very upset about Brexit, all up in the lead up to the vote, up to the referendum. They were, they couldn't get their heads around the fact that people would think differently to what they did.
Yeah.
There was no diversity there of thought and opinion. But what really, really struck me was, obviously, I was part of Team Vote Leave and I was out campaigning, never brought that into school. That was something I did. My activism was outside of school. That was my hobby. But what struck me was the day of the referendum, the morning of it, I came into school, I was teaching computer science, nothing to do with Brexit.
Yeah.
The head teacher and the deputy head teacher pulled me aside on my way in, said, come into the office, let's have a chat. Oh gosh, what have I done? I've been called into the headmaster's office.
Yeah.
Calvin, we understand that you're one of them, you're a Brexiter. Whatever you do, please don't mention Brexit today. I was like,
Wow, don't mention the B word.
why would I mention Brexit? I'm here to teach about binary programming and
Yeah.
assembler language, and it has no relevance to what I'm here to do. Of course I won't. I took what they said in good faith. But what I saw as I walked through the school that day was teachers almost crying to pupils. I know it's terrible, isn't it? I know. And we've got the same thing going on in America. They've got Donald Trump. He's going to get elected over there.
So it's almost like a trauma.
Yes, it was a trauma. So there's an announcement on the school PA system. The chapel is open for anyone who's particularly feeling hurt by the referendum results. And they had, the EU flag. Instead of the crucifix, they had the EU flag. Well, that's how serious they are about all
that
this.
Says quite a lot, really, doesn't it? Right? If you could define your ethos, your kind of philosophy, if you like, your political philosophy, what would you say it is?
First and foremost, Christian. So my faith is at the forefront of everything I do. So I always at least try to put Christ in everything that I'm doing. But if I had to identify my politics, I would say small state.
Yeah.
So give people the freedom to live their lives. What we class as the British values, democracy, the rule of law, tolerance of people of different faiths and none. They're so important, fundamental values that not everyone around the world celebrates. So we should.
You've been singled out quite a lot on social media, Twitter and so on and so forth. And you've been on the receiving end of some real vitriol and hatred, haven't you? Why? Why do you think?
Because I rocked the boat a little bit, and I think I upset the core of what is the approved narrative. I mentioned a group think in education. It's wider than just education. It is the left in general have kind of painted themselves as the good guys. And they've made an us versus them mentality. They've siloed off anyone that doesn't agree with them. And if you are part of that, and if you are speaking up and essentially breaking down what they're saying as a falsehood or bad, then you are the enemy and you are to be destroyed.
Well, I think your case in particular, you demonstrate very clearly that their position isn't really about ethics, it's about ideology.
Yes.
So the minute someone doesn't kind of fit into the box and respond as they think they should do to all the characteristics, then all hell breaks loose. How did that impact on you?
I mean, it's not pleasant. It's not something I enjoy. Always feeling like you're in a battle. But, a good example of what you just said is the critical race theory argument. On the left, they will say, we are the good guys because we want everyone to be equal. And of course, who wouldn't want equality, at least equality of opportunity? But what they're talking about is equity, not equality. And what they're talking about is, they're telling people that there are so many barriers to ethnic minorities in this country that you can never achieve anything. And I've said it a million times, but it is a self-fulfilling prophecy that if you tell people so often that they're held back, they'll start to believe it. And either they'll use it as an excuse or they'll see their life through that prism and feel held back. Whereas I stand up and say, no, you can make anything of your life if you work hard enough. Doesn't matter what colour your skin is in this country. We're all equal under the law. And I'm a living, breathing example of that, I've achieved some successes. I've made some failures as well, but that's how life works. Yeah. And we should all acknowledge that if we don't get to where we want to be in life, it's not because of the colour of our skin. It's because maybe we haven't worked hard enough or there are other circumstances at play. And we need to look at the wider picture and not just assume that it's down to our race, because that's lazy and ignorant and wrong. And by me saying that and living my life as I do, I break down what they're saying, and that their approach is the only approach that can fix racial inequalities. And the reason they want that is because that's how they get into power. That's how they get positions of control.
I suppose that's what I was going to say. the left supposedly empower, don't they? But by characterising certainly minorities in terms of victimhood, they do anything but, don't they? Would you say that's true?
Yeah, it's patronising. It's wrong. I think the far left at this point have reached, it is that, that shoehorn shape of politics. The far left have reached the elements of the far right, where they are putting people into boxes based on their immutable characteristics and saying you are this because of the way you were born and you can't control that about yourself. There's nothing you can do to change it. And that's wrong. We shouldn't be looking at the world like that. I'm not an individualist, but an individualistic approach is better than the collectivist approach in that everyone has an opportunity to change their lives, to live their lives as they see fit, and no one should be putting them into labels or boxes and say you belong in that group, you go on with stuff over there, and we'll do this, and we'll help you, of course. And how condescending is that? Like that, just because you're brown, you need help from someone who isn't brown. Why?
It's really condescending. It's really condescending. Can I just segue into and bring history into it slightly now, and I'm going to do it via an experience that you had, and it was on talk radio, I think, and you were talking to someone called Ken Hind, and this was you turned the Zoom off, didn't you? Yeah. What was going on in that?
First time I've ever walked out of an interview, but we were talking about Meghan Markle, actually, a person I really don't like for lots of reasons. But there's a common. This is a good argument of how it breaks down the left's argument, actually, because they would say you cannot criticize Meghan because if you do, you're racist because she's brown. And I'm obviously brown myself, so I thought, I'll criticise her because I don't like what she's done. I think actually she's lied on this point and that point, and that's inappropriate, immoral. I think she's attacking our British institution of the monarchy. But they couldn't automatically say, you're racist because I'm not white, which they would have done if I was white. They'd say, you're attacking a brown person, you are racist, which is why I stood up and did it publicly and said, no, this is not appropriate. But what the person did is said, you're letting the side down, you are mixed race as she is, you should
support her.
She is one of your own.
You should support her.
I should support her.
No matter what she's done or what she's said.
Because she's part of my tribe. And excuse me, she's not part of my tribe. If I belong to a tribe, it's my Christian brothers and sisters or my British subjects. I'm not part of a tribe based on the colour of my skin. And for someone to silo me into that is racist.
The theoretical woke leftist would say if you're black, you can't be racist.
Right. So critical race theory would say that racism is a power struggle between white people and BAMEs or black and minority ethnics, and therefore black people cannot be racist. It's because they're not in a position of power, which is always, of course, even that's not always true because it depends on where you're looking and what
context is everything.
Yeah, context is key. But of course, racism is prejudice or discrimination against someone based on the colour of their skin. So anyone can be racist. But this is another lefty thing, as in redefining words to win an argument. Now, I've seen and experienced racism on both sides. So I'm mixed race. I'm half white and half black. And I've experienced it myself personally on both sides, from black people, from white people. But I've seen it in both contexts. So where I grew up, I was the only black kid in my school. I experienced racism from as a teacher in London, a very foreign environment to me. I've seen schools where white British kids were actually the minority and they were picked on and bullied because of the colour of their skin, because of their race, therefore racially profiled and racially bullied. It contradicts everything that the leftists would say based on critical race theory. It falls apart. It's an argument that does not work, which is again another reason why they want to destroy me and people like me who hold the mirror up to them and show them the evidence, because evidence destroys their feelings. It's not about facts, it is about their feelings. And you can't argue the two, they're contradictory. So I don't think we have many systems. There are still some institutions in the country that might be considered racist, but we'd have to look into them further, because this is another thing, that every time we see an instance of racial inequality or racial injustice doesn't necessarily mean it's racism at play. And sticking to the healthcare system, people often say, well,
representation is another thing, isn't there?
Well, representation is another one, but I'm talking about inequalities. So, for example, black mothers tend to die in childbirth at a higher rate than white mothers in childbirth. Now, elements on the left would say that's clearly a case of systemic racism. The NHS is racist towards black people. But that's just cherry picking stats, because I can pick a stat and say, well, actually, white cancer patients die more frequently than black cancer patients. Therefore, the NHS is clearly systemically racist against white people. It's not. It doesn't pass the common sense test. It doesn't make any sense. But there are clearly other elements at play, other socio-economic factors at play, as there always are in our society. And as a Brit, you'll understand that, class, wealth, background all have massive parts to play in our outcomes in life, far more than the colour of our skin. But not to say that the colour of our skin doesn't have an impact, but we have to look at the bigger picture. And systemic racism paints racism as the core factor in people's lives. And why that's a problem is because if people don't get to where they want to be, they'll say, oh, well, of course I didn't get where I wanted to be in life because this country is racist. It's systemically, everything's against me. And that's not healthy for those individuals, but it's not healthy from people on the other end either.
I mean, it used to be the sins of the father were the sins of the father.
Right.
Now we carry the sins of the father. When did that...
Well, it's a very anti-Christian
When did that change? Yes, it is. It's a very anti-Christian thing. But when did it change? When did that start happening?
I think it's just part of the critical race theory methodology, because they love a Kafkaesque trap. They love something that you can't get out of.
Yeah.
So they'll say that white people are racist, either overtly or covertly.
Yeah.
So either you are obviously racist in that you're acting racist, you're doing things that are discriminatory, or if you're not, you must be covertly racist because you're not showing it. You're not showing your racism, but you are inherently racist.
Yeah.
And it's the same with this. Exactly.
I mean, there is
argument.
nothing you can do there, is there? You're racist, but you don't know it.
Yeah. So your ancestors were linked in some way to the British Empire, therefore you're guilty. And there's nothing you can do on this earth to undo what your ancestors may or may not have done.
Yeah. Okay, so if you were to critique white privilege and really pull it apart, you've kind of been quite generous there and steel-manned it. Yeah. Pull it apart.
Well, I'll stick to my classroom example in that we're telling black boys over and over again that they have so many hurdles to overcome, that they will never make anything of their lives because this country is against them. And we're telling white kids that they are racist, whether overtly or covertly, and they are harmful to the black kids. And it's causing division. It's stoking tensions where they didn't exist, where kids would once play together, not even seeing each other's race, just seeing friends across the classroom. They're now seeing each other. Yeah, they're now seeing each other, which we should strive towards. We should aim towards Martin Luther King's, treating people by the content of the character, not the colour of their skin.
What are the consequences for those black kids?
Well, the consequences is that they resent white kids and racism grows amongst the black community, as in the white person is the oppressor. And the other way around, white people become afraid of race. They're no longer able to discuss race to the point that they are either scared of being seen as racist or scared that they are a racist. And that causes division in our society. But what it also does is it stops us from fixing the problems. So as you mentioned, class is a massive divider in this country, but we can't get to the issue of class because we're so fixated on the problem being race. The biggest problem isn't actually race in most of these circumstances.
It's class.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
which tells me that these people on the left don't actually care about making our society better because they don't want to fix the root of the problem. They just want to be seen as good people. It's virtue signaling.